Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am Game Master Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's video I'm going to be taking a look at the core mechanics of ReconQuest RPG. So this game system comes in just hardcover, and there is no supporting PDF for it, although there are some PDFs on the website that are kind of like quick references and such. But when I was reading through the core mechanics here, I decided that I wanted to get just the basic calculations, presentable, so that I can hand these to a player if we're playing in person, or at least share them so that they have an even more well-defined quick reference that is super basic to the system, and so that it's just a real quick glance. And I'm going to show you what I came up with in order to do that. So it is a very simplified version of the core mechanics without going into great detail over the various modifiers and everything, which the Game Master actually is the one that applies, though. The player doesn't necessarily need those conditions and other modifiers front-facing to them. So I'm going to go over the core mechanics, and basically there are two core mechanics in this game system. The first are ability checks, and the second are combat checks. The two hit checks. And so I am going to break those down for you. And then I'm going to talk about attributes and the various attribute modifiers and how they work. And then I will do a much more in-depth look at combat, as far as, the hit. Again, I'll talk about the two hit, but I'll go into your defensive values and your armor and shields and how those impact everything else, because once again, this system here has certain things that I find to be fairly unique, and I'm really enjoying digging in and looking at a system and looking for those unique elements that make it kind of different or stand out, and things that I could actually apply elsewhere if I'm not using this system as the core system that I'm using. So without further ado, let me shift over to the other screen, and here we go. So this is ReconQuest rules, basic rules, mechanics, simplified. So the core mechanics, you have attribute checks. These are D20 roll low, modified by the difficulty of the task itself, the attribute modifier, the conditions in which you are either affected by or working under, and then your skill and or training. A natural 20 is always a failure. Remember, this is roll low. A natural 1 is always a success. When you roll a +5 above the attribute score, it is a critical failure. So let's say your attribute score is a 10, fairly average. A roll of 15 and above is actually a critical failure for you. So this really does add an element of of danger for critical failure when you are making these these attribute checks. -5 and below the attribute score is a critical success. So it also works on the other end as well. So if you do roll really well, and let's say you have a 10 and you rolled a 5 or better, 5 or below that, then you're going to have a critical success in what you're doing. So I like the fact that this system here really does increase the probabilities of critical failures and critical successes, and it kind of keeps that range very different in just straight up success or failure, very different based on the character's attribute score. So the higher your score, the harder it's going to be to get that critical failure. But you'll have the bonuses from that high attribute score to have a better chance at getting critical success. It's like if you have an 18 and it's a +3, you're rolling a +3, so anything really above the 18 is going to start pushing into that critical success area as well. So I'm kind of liking that. Combat checks are almost the exact opposite, right? So combat checks are D20 roll high modified by the attribute modifier, conditions, and the skill and or training to hit a target number, which is known as the defensive value of the opponent. A natural 20, I got to clean this up a little bit. A natural 20 is always a success. A natural 1 is always a failure. Equal to the target number equals a partial hit or a glancing hit that will do 1/2 damage. Target number plus equals +1 damage per pip above the target number needed. So if I needed to roll a 12 to hit the target and I roll a 15, I'm not only going to hit and roll my regular damage, but I'm also going to add an additional +3 to the damage done. Target number +5 or more is a critical hit. I gotta fix my typing here. Is a critical hit. It does double damage die plus the bonus to the damage roll, for that roll. So let's say I rolled a natural 20. I'm going to do, and I needed that same 12. Well, I'm going to roll 2 damage die, and I'm going to add a +8 to that damage. It'll be a very, very significant damage, dealing in that case. Anything less than the target number is a miss. -5 below the target number is a fumble or critical miss. And then you'll go to the fumble chart and critical miss charts to see what the impact of that is. So I started to simplify the system, verbally a little bit and put it in writing and try to just draw out the raw rolls. Now, when I go to the difficulty adjustments, so you have a routine, which means that there is no need to roll a die. An easy, and this is talking about your first core mechanic. This is talking about your ability checks. An easy task, you're going to be at a -4, which is positive, right? That's a good thing that it's -4. So if you have an attribute of a 12, well, you're going to roll your D20 and you're going to apply any modifiers that you have, and then you're going to adjust by difficulty. So if you're doing an easy task, you're going to -4 from that particular roll. If it's a medium task, which is the average task, you're going to be at no modifier for difficulty. A hard is going to be a +4, very hard is going to be a +8, and absurdly hard is going to be a +12 to that roll. Impossible is an automatic critical failure, and there's an asterisk. It says see the thief and the character roles, and I'll take a look at that later on when I cover the different character roles here. Your conditions are also going to modify your attributes and your attribute checks. So if you are afraid, you're going to be at a +2 for your attribute rolls. Remember, it's a roll low, so that is going to harm you. All right, adjustment to movement rate is going to be +5. So when you are, and I'll talk about movement rates later, but if you're afraid, you're not going to, if the MR movement rate of a character becomes 0 or less, that character is incapacitated. So so when you're afraid, you actually have a +5 to your movement rate. In other words, you'll move a little faster, which is kind of interesting, right? So you will move 5 feet faster than normal when you're afraid. If you are blinded, you're at a +8 to your adjustment to your die rolls. All right, so much, much harder to do attribute checks when you're blinded. And then your maximum when you're blinded is 5 feet movement rate. All right, so you cannot move very quickly at all when you're blinded. If you're encumbered, you're at a +2 to your adjustment die rolls, and you might be as much as a -10 to your movement rate, which could actually impact you and could actually reduce you to being incapacitated. You cannot move until you dump that encumbrance. If you're helpless, obviously you have no adjustment, you can't do anything. If you're poisoned, you're at a +2 ability check, which again is negative, and you are -10 to movement, so you cannot move very well. If you're seriously injured, has lost more than 1/2 of all of your HP, you're at a +2 to your roll low attribute checks, and a -10 to your movement rate. If you are sick, you're at a +2 and a -10. If you're soaking wet, you're at a +2 and a -5. All right. Yeah, that's one thing with this creator, is that he likes to include that soaking wet. I guess when you live in Northern Europe, you're kind of used to being soaking wet and probably kind of miserable from it as well. And so it's it's an issue. There's always some kind of a negative attached to being soaking wet. When I was in the Army, they used to believe and used to say to us all the time that you're not training if it isn't raining out. And they loved when we might have been miserable, but we certainly weren't as limited as this would make you think if you're just soaking wet. If you are stunned, you have no attribute checks that you can make, and you have no movement. If you're submerged in water, you're at +2 for your attribute checks and sea soaking wet. So you're not moving very well being soaking wet. And then finally, if you're tired, you're at a +2 adjustment to your attribute checks and a -10 to your movement. Let's see what else they have here. So we have other adjustments for the amount of illumination and what type of sight that you have. So if you have night vision, in nighttime, you're at a +0 adjustment. In direct sunlight, you're at -2. In pitch black darkness, you're at +6. All right, so very, very hard. I mean, better for you because these are rolls. I'm sorry. So it's negative for you to be in those conditions. Human eyes. All right, so at nighttime, you're at a +4, which is not good. In direct sunlight, you're still at a +2, which I find interesting. And in pitch black, you are in +6. So having human eyes, and when they say direct sunlight, they mean like glaring sunlight. Like if you're, you're in the frozen wastelands and you're getting a lot of sun glare off the snow, snow blindness, or if you're in direct sunlight in the desert and there's really no shade and you have to shield your eyes from that direct sunlight, you're going to be at a -2. So there's definitely a lot of adjustments that take place, a lot of modifiers that take place in this system. Roll low and roll high, I already talked about that. The character ability scores. So the character ability scores are like what you would expect to see in most fantasy role-playing games. So you have strength, and your strength is going to modify your offensive value melee weapons, both in attacks and damage. All right, and then your it's also going to impact your carrying capacity, your maximum capacity for carrying, and your movement rate. So let me give you an example. So if you have an 18 strength, you're going to be at a +3 at your offensive value, um, for melee. So you're going to be at a +3 to hit and damage. When you go to your carrying capacity is going to be 90 pounds. Your maximum carrying capacity is going to be 180 pounds, and you are going to move at a +10 feet movement rate. So your strength will allow you to move um, longer and faster during your turn. Dexterity impacts your offensive value missile weapons as well as your defensive value. It is the main aspect of your defensive value other than wearing armor. It also impacts your climbing rate. So again, let's take a look at that 18. You're going to be at a +3 for your offensive value with missile weapons. You're going to be at a +3 for defensive value. That's going to increase your armor class, basically. And you're going to be at a +15 climbing rate. So you're going to climb a lot faster. So strength impacts your movement rate. Dexterity impacts your climbing rate. Constitution. So a constitution is going to impact your hit points. It's going to impact your evasion. It's going to impact your swimming rate and your ability to hold your breath. So an 18 constitution, your swimming rate is going to be at 15 feet per round, and you can hold your breath for 9. I'm going to assume, so holding breath in times of rounds of 5 seconds each. So for 45 seconds. So you'd be able to hold your breath for 9 5-second rounds. Your intelligence is going to give you modifiers to extra languages that you know and your daily spells. So an 18 intelligence is going to give you 2 extra languages and 3 extra daily spells. It doesn't use like spell levels in the same way that Dungeons and Dragons does. It uses them a little bit differently, and I'll save that for details later on. Willpower. So willpower determines the character's ability to resist temptations, his spiritual persistence, self-discipline, and courage. Willpower is tested whenever a character needs to resist temptations, fear, and magic. There are no charts for willpower, so you're not getting the same kind of bonuses or whatever that I can see here. So there are no charts for it. Charisma, same thing. Charisma determines the character's relationships to spirits and the divine, and is the sum of inner and outer beauty. Character charisma is tested for all social interactions, and so for everything related to the luck and to the divine. They're probably using the generic pluses and minuses for the attribute level. All right, so it doesn't have specific things tied to them like offensive value or defensive value, but it will still give you the standard pluses and minuses. And then we will get into character races, or I will get into character races and character roles in the next video, but that's pretty much your core mechanics right there, is that you're going to have core mechanics that are either ability based, and your attribute scores based, or they're going to be, based on the combat, and you're either roll high for combat or roll low for attribute checks. And it really is a very simple system when you break it down that way. And then when you start looking at the other nuances that are in it, and that's part of the design in this, the design purpose of this, that yes, it does get crunchier, but the creator, the author of the system, basically said that it's a good thing to introduce new players to to some crunchiness in the system because math is a good thing, and this is not that it's not that onerous as far as adding these various attributes and everything. Because once you know your attribute modifiers and everything, you're going to write them on your index card or whatever, your character sheet, and you'll have them readily available. And you'll pick up very quickly on whether you're doing a roll high or a roll low. You'll pick up very quickly on what are my overall modifiers when I'm doing these things. And the only thing you're expecting from the game master is for the game master to set the difficulty and to set the conditions that you are currently in. And then he or she will either let you know as the player what you need to roll in order to be successful, or they'll wait until you roll and then let you know whether you were successful or not. So I'm really liking the system. I'm liking some of the uniqueness that they have here, like with the movement rates attached to both strength and then dexterity. I like the fact that your attributes are starting to attach themselves to other things that you normally don't see elsewhere. And so, really excited to continue digging into this. And, and I can't wait to actually have the time and the opportunity to run it. So that will be quite some time off because I have so many other projects going on right now. But I do want to continue dedicating some time to covering the system and putting out these videos for you to watch and react to and respond to. And as always, I welcome everyone to continue watching. Hit the subscribe button, hit the alert button so you know when these things are going to drop. If you're here just for ReconQuest, then I encourage you to look at everything else as well on the channel. And if you're here looking at everything else on the channel, take a look at ReconQuest. It's a pretty cool system thus far, and somewhat of a breakaway from your very basic OSR D&D based kind of systems. It's more of a combination of and a connection to, I still think of like Rollmaster, and certainly has an influence on this as well, but it certainly does have some layers of complexity to it that that are interesting. So thank you all for joining in, and you all have a great rest of your week. It's absolutely gorgeous here in New York. The weather these last couple days have been really, really good, and so take the time to get some sunshine and grass under your feet if you can, if you're experiencing very good weather as well. So you all have a great one. Take care.